Restituto.
Comes up in the pocket. Fires to the right side. Caught by Diggs. Stay up. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Touchdown. Are you kidding me? It's the Minneapolis Miracle.
I got 3 words for you. You like that? Yeah!
Welcome to the Rest Stop on this Thursday evening, July 15th, 2021. I'm Brad Restituto on Instagram, Twitter at Brad the Believer. Also watch us live, twitch.tv/Chris Landry Football. Like and subscribe to the YouTube channel, Brad the Believer. Going to recap last night's Game 4 of the NBA Finals where the Milwaukee Bucks evened up the series with the Phoenix Suns 2 games apiece. Milwaukee has to travel back to Phoenix tomorrow. I believe tomorrow night will be Game 5.
Actually, 2 games from now. Yes.
2 games from now.
Or 2 days, not 2 games from now.
2 days from now. On I believe on Saturday, Spence.
Yep,
on Saturday will be from Phoenix, Game 5, as the Bucks won 109-103 last night. So we'll get into that, discuss that. Some news in the sports world. Richard Sherman in the news for not a good way, arrested here the last couple of days. We'll get the audio to Richard Sherman there and some more sports stories. But before we get to that, I just want to let everyone know tonight will be the last episode of the Rest Stop for the foreseeable future. A new job has popped up that will take away from the times we run the podcast, and it'll be an evening schedule. And with Spence's schedule during the day, we just won't be able to record live or do some consistent podcasting stuff in the foreseeable future. So this will be the last episode for the Rest Stop. So I hope you stick around. We don't know what's going to happen down the road. So I want to thank Chris Landry. I want to thank Spence for all his work and everybody that's tuned in for the time that we've had the podcast on. But with COVID being where it's at and everybody having to get back in the job force, I had to take a job that's outside of the broadcasting media that's going to have me working nights and take me away from the stuff I really would love to be doing full time. But it's just not happening right now the way it should. So I hope everyone sticks around, enjoys this last show, still supports the YouTube channel, Brad the Believer. We'll get on and do some recapping of sports games, of big sporting news, and me and Spence will still get together every now and then. We'll do some podcasts, and I'll jump on some stuff with him. So make sure you still like and subscribe and follow us on the YouTube channels. For Spence, it's Blue Milk Boys Gaming. For me, at Brad the Believer on Twitter, YouTube, all that good stuff. So I hope everyone still supports the Rest Stop and the show. I've loved doing this, being able to have the freedom to do what I've wanted to do, and Spence has joined me and been awesome through the whole way. It's been absolutely amazing. It's been a dream in itself to be able to just kind of have the freedom to do what I want. I want to thank Chris Landry for that also. I would have loved to have done more creatively and entertainment-wise with the podcast and just spent more time diving into it in depth, but financially it just wasn't something that I was able to do completely. And I hope it hasn't taken away from the sports we've given you with the podcast and me and Spence's dynamic here. So I've really enjoyed it a whole bunch, and I hope everyone sticks around tonight and still follows us on the sports platform media outlets and follows everything that we're doing from there. So moving on from there, Spence, last night, the Milwaukee Bucks tied the series at 2. But before we get into that, before we get into the sports, I want to talk about a tweet that came out today from Rich Eisen. Rich Eisen, of course, hosts the Rich Eisen Show. He was on the NFL Network, a big sports media broadcaster. Rich Eisen put a tweet out that he tested positive for COVID-19, and he's been vaccinated twice, Spence. And to me, this is kind of raises your eyebrows a little bit because there's still a lot of information that we don't have, and it's almost impossible to have accurate information long-term when we're still analyzing the effects of what's happening with COVID and the vaccines just being rolled out for people being symptomatic, asymptomatic, testing positive after they've been vaccinated. So it's really a tricky and slippery landscape to navigate. We talked before the show and came out that Brad Beal for the U.S. men's basketball Olympic team is going to miss possibly the Olympics with testing positive COVID protocol. We know Chris Paul tested positive at the beginning of the playoffs, or at least that's what we heard. So, Spence, this is really an interesting thing here because it just came out a few hours ago that the state of California is imposing a mask mandate for all people, whether you've been vaccinated or not, indoors. And that will start sometime this weekend, which is crazy to me. It's crazy to me, and it makes me think Nevada, where we're at here in Las Vegas, is next to impose this mandatory mask mandate, even if you've been vaccinated. And Spence, you kind of just have to throw your hands in the air because all of us are sitting here scratching our heads without answers to important questions. Not saying that if you have to go back to wearing masks, it's the end of the world. But of course, people want to get back to a sense of normalcy. That's why we've seen people out in full effect, especially here in Vegas, Spence. I mean, tell everybody what just happened here in Vegas this past weekend. It seemed like the entire city was jam-packed, full of sardines with so many events going on all at once.
Well, first, I just wanted to say congratulations, on the show. It has been really fun to reflect back on it when the intro played, starting August 25th, 2020. It's kind of crazy to think about how long it's been there. So, but it's been a really fun journey, and certainly will not be the end. I have plenty of other stuff planned, for us. It just won't be, in the form of this podcast for the time being. But yeah, I mean, you talked about it. Talked about it before. On Saturday, Garth Brooks plays at Allegiant Stadium. Bruno Mars plays at, I think, MGM Park. And then obviously the Conor McGregor fight, which was one of the biggest UFC events that we've seen, basically throughout the year. I think there was 1.8 million pay-per-view buyers or pay-per-views bought, whatever you want to say. So obviously it had a lot of buzz and was packed inside the T-Mobile Arena. And I think that's fine. I think it's good, to get back to a little sense of normalcy, but we're certainly not, I don't know, that far. It was like $80 for parking. So just to talk about how desperate the situation was for some people, I don't know. I mean, I certainly will not be partaking in those kinds of festivities, but if you think that was bad, and it obviously was, I'm talking about crowd-wise, the Raiders, I mean, they fit a lot of people in those stadiums, and it's not just going to be Allegiant Stadium that's packed on these weekends for Raiders football. I mean, people are going to be all over the Strip. So that one little sample on Saturday is only going to be what every Sunday looks like at the very least, on top of when the Golden Knights get back into the swing and more concerts. We're going to sell out here no matter what. That's what it comes down to. If in the middle of the pandemic they open the city back up, people would have come. This is the city where people come to release their demons. I mean, it is Sin City, and it's kind of like a cliche thing at this point, but there is a lot of truth to it that people come here to, go crazy, and they certainly do. Maybe not all the locals, and I would say probably not a lot of locals. There's always those, but it's the people from the outside that come here with reckless abandon, and I think that's where we can get in some real trouble.
Yeah, I completely agree, Spence. You talked about all the events that happen here, and people have pretty much gone away with the distancing if they've been vaccinated, which I don't intentionally get around large groups of people, but seeing a prominent name like Rich Eisen and other athletes and celebrities that, or at least have announced they've been vaccinated, still coming down with COVID. I had COVID in November, have been vaccinated twice. My second vaccine, I believe, was in May. It makes me raise my eyebrows a little bit because you kind of think you're in the clear a little bit, but apparently that's not entirely the case. And there's not, like we said, there's not enough information out there to accurately analyze what this vaccine protects against, how your antibodies are built up. I mean, I think you can test your antibodies. I think there's a way to do that. So it makes you just kind of be a little more heightenedly aware. And Spence, we talked about different places that's hyper contagious as far as that we don't give enough attention to. Your gas stations, your door handles, that places don't have people necessarily there after every consumer or every individual leaves to wipe it down. It makes it kind of a eyebrow raising situation. So we have to monitor it one day at a time. You mentioned, Spence, we talked about, you read something, 7,000 cases a day of COVID in Florida, which is just nuts. That seems wild to me. But it's just definitely something everybody still has to keep in the back of their mind. And you still want to be overall responsible and safe each and every day that you leave your house, regardless of what the circumstances. Bravo mentioned on the chat here that 4 Yankees tested positive. I'm not sure the number of Yankees, but I know that this is a true story with this series, and that there's been some unvaccinated Yankees players that were symptomatic that tested positive, and some vaccinated Yankees players that were asymptomatic also tested positive. So it's coming around again, Spence. Whether we like it or not, we have to prepare for what that's going to look like. Hopefully it doesn't get to the point where we start shutting stuff down again, and it impacts the economy and the workflow, because that's a scary thought. But there's not a lot we can do outside of ourselves, but take care of ourselves, the people in our household, and then when we go out to our communities, do the best that we can do as far as sanitizing ourselves and trying to distance the safest way possible. So it's hit Major League Baseball. It's hit sports broadcasting. We talked about Brad Beal with USA Basketball. They've had to postpone or cancel the exhibition game versus Australia. It's probably going to affect Bradley Beal going to Tokyo for the Olympics. How does that affect the rest of the team? We still don't know what's going to happen down the line. I don't know if Brad Beal was vaccinated. We don't know about the rest of the Team USA players, but this is going to probably be a big storyline coming into Tokyo, not only for basketball, but for other sports. So I saw another tweet, Spence, that there's about 4 NFL teams that are still under 50% as a team vaccinated. So, I'm an advocate of people being free and doing what they want to do with their body, but I've certainly moved more towards the guy that's just like, go ahead and get your vaccine. It's the responsible, right thing to do for us all to get back to a sense of normalcy. And some people are just still real resistant, which I don't want to come down on them. But Spence, look where we're moving towards, because if you had to choose to go back to being for sure locked down for 18 months or get the vaccine, I think a lot of people's choices would be to get the vaccine, especially if it was free and accessible in their communities. So I would just hate to see things start to shift in the opposite direction of where we've got it to at this point. And I don't think we're there yet, but it's certainly, the signs are not looking good when Las Vegas does what it did this past weekend, putting 5 huge events all in the same day. That's insane. And I really haven't put it in perspective till we sat here and talked about it. But it's not just the city of Vegas, Florida, other states, Major League Baseball, all the professional sports. We all have to kind of be on guard a little bit and make sure that we don't take 4 steps forward and then 10 steps back.
Yeah, I'm going to say a word that scares, and I think is essentially an idea that is gone, and that's responsibility. People do not want to be responsible for their own actions. They don't want to be responsible young adults. Look, I'm vaccinated, right? And I do go out because I don't want to live inside my house every day forever. Like, I have to, for your mental health sake, to see friends and have contact with them. But I generally stay away. I stick with my party alone, and I have a good time. I've gone out to restaurants and other such things. I went to a movie theater once. I found some seats away from people. So look, there is those things that you did in life are still out there, but I think it's about, doing things the right way, where you're trying to also stay safe. Like, some people just have thrown that to the wind, where they just think we're in the clear now, but we all knew that we weren't for a long time. The fact that I think less than 50% of the country is still vaccinated, that does not mean herd immunity, obviously. And clearly it's affecting a lot of these states, especially Florida, which is just red hot right now for whatever reason. And I think if this pandemic has proven anything, is that fear is the most profitable form of anything in marketing. It's fear on many sides, right? I remember on some news channels, they had a live COVID death count on there, essentially keeping people glued to the screen. But it works on the other side. They say there's also the people who say this guy got the vaccine and he died, or he had, this or that. And there are obviously some cases of people who took the vaccine who had complications, but in general, people are going to be okay. And I would say, weighing it against, how dangerous COVID is, I think the vaccine's a little bit better for you. And some of them clearly seem, for certain age groups, you shouldn't do it. And I'm not a medical doctor, I'm not, that, but doing the research, I think you can find a vaccine that works for you versus, not only giving yourself the chance to get it more likely if you're not vaccinated, And that's one thing, and that can be a personal choice. But COVID isn't technically a personal choice because you can give it to so many people. And it's like, maybe COVID's not the most, dangerous virus that's ever existed, but it's certainly one of the most contagious. So by you being irresponsible and seeing guys like Cole Beasley be extremely irresponsible with stuff like that, he doesn't understand that if he's asymptomatic and he gives it to someone who's like definitely at risk, well, then they've just put that person's life in danger and potentially, could have killed somebody just because they feel like they have to take a strong stance. And it's starting to feel like the whole anti-vax movement is essentially just this like bully thing where, oh, I'm different. I don't have to do this or that. It's like a childish comeback, like against your parents to say like, I'm not going to take the vaccine. It's crazy. It's not about like the actual in and out of the vaccine. It's just about being rebellious. And I think, as an adult, you should be way past that stage in your life.
Yeah, I completely agree, Spence. Last thought, somebody that we know and you're good friends with here locally, there's a Twitter post or Facebook post came out that he tested positive. I'm not sure his vaccination status. I think they said he was vaccinated. So it's happening here in the Valley too. And with all of these events that just went on, and you talked about how severe this is as far as spreading, it kind of puts you at big time caution because it does spread like wildfire here. It absolutely does. I remember when I caught it in November, Spence, a month before that, I had heard in the gym that I was going to that somebody had it, and it wasn't long before it got around. And, some people, you just don't know, man. You just don't know, and you just got to be as careful as you can. We're both vaccinated, so those are positive things. But I hope everyone out there just is as safe as possible and really weighs all the pros and cons when they're making a decision. And if they're not vaccinated, do their best possible to stay away from people and not expose them, even if they're not symptomatic, because you just don't know. You just don't know. So, Spence, let's move on to Game 4 of the NBA Finals last night. We talked about it briefly at the beginning. The Milwaukee Bucks, they come back in the fourth quarter. They outscore Phoenix 33-21 in the fourth, and then in comeback fashion at home get the 109-103 victory. Giannis had 26 points, 14 rebounds, 8 assists. Devin Booker was outstanding for Phoenix, 42 points, 17 of 28 from the field, and a bounce-back performance from his Game 3 10-point outing. But Milwaukee did enough late, and they made it happen. Chris Middleton, big night for him, 7 of 8 from the free throw line, 3 of 8 from 3, 15 of 33 from the field, 40 points. And, of course, Giannis had that huge block in the fourth quarter, and Milwaukee took care of business. They held home court, and they evened the series at 2 games apiece. We talked Game 5 will be Saturday in Phoenix, and the Suns are looking to hold home court. As we talked about it after Phoenix went up 2-0, this series was far from over. I do think absolutely Milwaukee has the momentum right now, but I don't think by any means this means Milwaukee is going to win in 6 or Milwaukee has this in the bag. I think home court has certainly been a factor, which is a big difference from the Orlando bubble last year. These teams are comfortable and play better at home, and the role players play better at home. We saw that with Mikal Bridges with Phoenix. We've seen it with Middleton here with Milwaukee, and the crowd is fired up to be back involved in sports in these finals. So it's going to be really fun to watch. Pivotal Game 5, a 3-game series now, which 2 of those games will be in Phoenix. Game 5 being the first of those. And I know it seems like Milwaukee has really took control of this series, and maybe they have, but I think Phoenix gets back and maybe gets Game 5 at home, as they probably should have had Game 4. They were leading most of the way, and if it weren't for an explosion in the fourth quarter of Milwaukee and some key turnovers, uncharacteristic missed free throws from Phoenix, and a few plays going here or there, that game could have been different. But Phoenix does hang on, and they do cover the spread. And another exciting game is, I know a lot of people and media pundits have talked about the ratings of this finals are not being as exciting. There's no Durant, there's no Curry, there's no LeBron. But if you're a basketball fan, you've got an opportunity for the Phoenix Suns to win their first ever NBA title in franchise history. Chris Paul, future Hall of Famer, NBA legend, has his opportunity for his first title. Giannis, an up-and-coming, already a superstar, but up-and-coming in his career, multiple-time MVP, looking to get his first title, in which may be his best opportunity ever, Spence, because all the dominoes has fallen into place for Milwaukee injury-wise, whether it's Brooklyn's injuries with Kyrie, and James Harden, or whether it's Embiid's injuries in Philly, everything fell into place to put Milwaukee here. They had to go 7 games against Brooklyn. They were down 2-0 in this series. So I think there's a lot of good storylines, and somebody's going to be hoisting that Larry O'Brien trophy, and it's going to be very coveted because it may be the only one that either of these franchises get in their superstars' careers.
Yeah, and there's so many aspects to this game that were so important. But the first thing I wanted to say is that, I believe that so many sports opinions are so narrow-minded and they're so caught up in the moment. Skip Bayless, when Milwaukee beat Atlanta without Giannis, said they're better without Giannis. Obviously, that's not true. And then as we've seen throughout this playoffs, to say Chris Middleton stinks, you know what I mean? All of these can change in a game's notice. But wow, sure. You want to talk about what a one-game notice is. Chris Paul. I don't know if it hasn't really been talked about all that much, or I'm sure it has throughout radio today. But boy, he was awful in that game. Horrible. I think he had 7 assists to 5 turnovers, and obviously the game-ending turnover at the end there. So when I look at it, it's so funny. Chris Paul, everyone is such an avid supporter of him. Everybody, for the most part, so few people are I've never liked Chris Paul. Everyone's rooting for him, but we all know about his history of falling apart in the most important games. But it didn't look like he was going to do that. He came out hot as can be in game 1. I mean, unstoppable he looked like. And now he's looking a little more like we've seen him throughout his career. Let's just say theoretically, because there's still so many other points in the game, but I would love to start with Chris Paul. If he does lose this finals, does your opinion on him change at all? Considering what he's done in this year's playoffs, is he below where he started, coming into this year's playoffs, above where he started, considering he got them there? I'm not exactly sure how I feel, but what do you think?
Well, I think we tried to talk about this last week when Phoenix went up 2-0. Where does Chris Paul's legacy lie, whether he wins or doesn't win the NBA Finals? And I think it certainly, if you have an NBA title under your belt at this stage of your career, at any stage of your career, it elevates you to another level that you wouldn't be at if you were not a champion, regardless. So of course there's going to be that supreme prestige of being an NBA champion. If the Phoenix Suns can hold on and figure out a way to take care of this series where they have the home court, there's nothing that you can change about somebody being a champion. They'll never take that away from him. And at this point in his career, I still think the journey that's brought him and the Phoenix Suns here to this point, he's elevated his overall legacy, in my opinion. I feel like he's done a fantastic job overall. Has he been inconsistent here in the last couple of games? Certainly. Chris Middleton, who has played great in times, has been one of the most inconsistent players in the playoffs, if you're asking me, for being a number 2 to a championship contender. But I don't think this negatively impacts Chris Paul's legacy if they don't win. I think Chris Paul has moved himself into the conversation of a top 5 point guard ever, legitimately in the conversation. And I think that's an okay conversation to have. And I think there's going to be guys that back him and don't on both sides of the coin. And I think regardless if he wins or not, yeah, certainly, Spence, you have a really good point, and a lot of people will talk about his inconsistency in big moments and in the playoffs, and it certainly showed itself last night and at moments in this series. So these next 3 games are going to be really big for him, and I'm sure he feels a little bit of pressure, but I also think he'll rise to the occasion, Spence, especially in Phoenix. So I think that's what makes it exciting also to watch. Who's going to be the one on each team that's going to take that blame? Because somebody's going to lose here, Spence. It's either going to be Phoenix or Milwaukee, and one of these star players is going to get the finger pointed at them saying they didn't do enough or they made a key mistake that cost them the NBA Finals. And they're going to have to live with that the entire offseason coming into next year. And that's going to be a really important factor mentally, team-wise, for one of these teams. One of these teams is going to be absolutely heartbroken, Spence, because they know this is their best opportunity probably ever. I legitimately think this is both teams' best opportunity they will ever have, at least in the next decade, to win an NBA title, even though I think Phoenix is set up masterfully for the future with the mixture of young guys and veterans. I think they're going to be a great team, but there's so many other teams that are going to be good too. The competition's so good, we've talked about. So I legitimately think this is both teams' best opportunity to win a title. So I think whoever falls short is going to be devastated. Not that you wouldn't be devastated regardless, but even more so, Spence, because you know in your gut this is your best shot, and to have it slip through your fingers to know that both teams are now in a 3-game series, and if it's Phoenix, to know that you couldn't win 2 out of 3 at home, and for Milwaukee to feel like that they let some things slip out of their hands, and that's where the story still has yet to be written in these next 3 games, because there's going to be somebody that's going to be the GOAT, and GOAT in a bad way, meaning some key missed free throws, some key turnovers, because not every game the rest of the way is going to be a blowout. I think we're going to see some closer games here. So there's going to be somebody that's going to be scrutinized big time, and it's going to be interesting to see who that player is, who that coach is, and to see how that affects them not only in this series but moving forward.
Yeah, when I think of this conversation, I always try to contextualize it of, if I do have kids, like what I would tell my kids. And they say, my dad tells me about Michael Jordan, about Scottie Pippen, but when I have kids, I'll be talking to them about Chris Paul and all the other kind of players from his generation. I don't know what I'm going to say about Chris Paul. Obviously, it's still contingent on what happens in the rest of the series, but if he does flame out, I may tell him he was a great point guard, but he could never get it done. I mean, there is no better opportunity than right now. Undoubtedly, and Jonas Knox made this point today, on Fox Sports Radio, a great opinion, or a great observation, I should say, is that the reality of the situation, and it didn't really become apparent until, recently, Giannis is by and far above the best player in this series, and it's not even close. So if you have the best player like that for the next 3 games, it looks actually pretty good for Milwaukee. But, home court advantage seems to be worth so much in this year's playoffs. But on the other side of it, too, and in terms of like who could fall apart in this year's playoffs or finals, and they already are for the most part, is Jrue Holiday. The guy went 4 for 20 in the game. Look, I'm not saying you got to put a shot restriction on him, and it felt like that was kind of Westbrook's problem for so long in his career, and when he shot more than Kevin Durant. But that's kind of where I cap it off. Like I felt the same way, like during those Thunder days. Westbrook, Jrue Holiday, they should never be shooting more than the best player on the team. It worked out for them, but I can't imagine you can't have too many 4 for 20 games and your team comes out on top. It's just not a good look for you. And this guy's a great passer. He's having some of the best games of his career in this year's playoffs, without Giannis on some of them. And I think it's fine. If you're having a bad offensive game, I think they can make up for it. PJ Tucker took 1 shot in the 4th quarter. It was a corner 3, and that's it. I can't imagine, I would be too upset for him taking, 4 or 5 maybe corner 3s a game. But that's not going to happen when Jrue Holiday has that kind of confidence on the offensive side of the ball. Every basketball game is different, so you don't want to say, okay, I want you to shoot 10 to 15 times. That's just not really how it works. But I think he has to be more mentally aware because he's playing great defense on Chris Paul. They do switch on everything, but for the most part, when he guards him, Chris Paul only had 10 points, and even the game before, only 19. So he's sticking on him, and he's doing his job pretty well. I just feel like if he was a little more conservative on the other side, the Bucks would have a massive advantage over the Phoenix Suns at this point.
Spence, I'm going to push back on a comment you made that you said Jonas Knox made on Straight Outta Vegas that Giannis is by far and away not even close to the best player in this series. I'm not going to agree with that. I'm not going to say he's not the best player, but far and away, I disagree. The guy that was the star last night in a loss, Devin Booker, who bounced back fantastically from an awful game 3. He was phenomenal last night, Spence. 17 of 28 from the field, 42 points. He did his job in this game, putting Phoenix in a position to steal one in Milwaukee. Now, he has not been this consistent the entire year, but Spence, make no mistake about it, Devin Booker is the singular guy, the most important player on this Phoenix team, and the most important reason they are where they're at. You can argue any other player where you're at, but if it were not for Devin Booker being Devin Booker consistently this entire season and through his career, he is the cornerstone of this Phoenix Suns team. You can argue it all you want. That's facts. This guy has scored 70 points in an NBA basketball game, one of 2 or 3 players ever to do that. This guy's been an Olympian, an all-star, a rising superstar in this league at 24 years old for quite a few years. And we talked about it coming out of the NBA bubble that Phoenix is going to give people problems. This is before Chris Paul was added to the team because Devin Booker is that much on the rise. And they went from not being in the playoffs to now, regardless of how they got there, in the NBA Finals. And you could argue that in Game 3 in Milwaukee, if Devin Booker has a game like he has in game 4, the Suns win that game, even though they lost by a lot, because Jay Crowder was great. Cam Johnson campaign. So Devin Booker, while he's not the best player in the series, Giannis is. I don't think it's by far and away unanimous that Giannis is 5 leaps ahead of Devin Booker. And Devin Booker will show you this, Spence, the rest of the series, especially if Phoenix wins. It's going to be large in part because Devin Booker plays outstanding. And he's a little bit underrated what he can do defensively. I think he's a pretty good defender. Look, he's no Giannis. Giannis is a game changer defensively and can be. Devin Booker is not. But Devin Booker is a superstar, and he, in my opinion, is the cornerstone of why the Phoenix Suns are in the NBA Finals.
No, there's no doubt. They're nowhere near the finals without Devin Booker. He pulls it all together. But I am going to push back on a couple of things here. I thought Devin Booker played so irresponsible in Game 4. It's like he just lost his mind, and that for me downgrades him so much. 5 fouls, and he intentionally fouls Jrue Holiday. They don't call it. I don't know. Maybe Adam Silver phoned that one in, and he was in their earpiece, told him don't call it. But then again, he had another foul, like pretty much a few plays later. Again, they do not call it. You can't do that if you're the best player on your team, which Devin Booker technically is for them right now. That's just if there's going to be a layup, you have to give up a layup because they need you in the game. Look, no one's going to get that lucky like ever again. Pretty much. I mean, it's just I have no explanation for why they called it that way. But also, I mean, the way that Giannis affects the game on both sides. I mean, Devin Booker's fine defensively, but that block that Giannis had on DeAndre Ayton it looked impossible. Like the way where he was positioned when the ball left his hand and the the kind of ground he was able to make up for that. And that's how I feel about LeBron James too, with the big block that he had against the Warriors, where it's simply, you just can't do that. Like most players, even the best point guard in the world just can't do that. But I would also say, I think an even more important player in this series is DeAndre Ayton, who didn't have a great game, on the boards. Obviously he had like 17 rebounds, but he had 6 points. And I feel like they have to exploit that a lot more. And they're not in this series, and certainly not in the finals without DeAndre Ayton. The way this guy just pulls their team together. They play a very traditional style of basketball, and I've always been, within the thought process that, being the best at what you do is all that matters, to win a championship. It's not about this certain play style is better than the other. And when he's off the floor, basically the Phoenix Suns are just a small team with, inconsistent shooting at some points. But when he's on the floor, it changes the dynamic of all of it. So I would argue that DeAndre Ayton is the most important player for the Phoenix Suns.
Well, we've got 3 games to make an interesting analysis about who and why one team and not the other is hoisting the Larry O'Brien trophy. And I can tell you this about Giannis. As great as he's been, if there's a close game and he has one of those struggles from the free throw line where he shoots 4 of 12, 4 of 13, and they lose, Giannis will be talked about in his free throw shooting, the reason why the Milwaukee Bucks aren't champions and why they may never be champions. So that's a big weight to carry, Spence, and a lot of pressure for a guy that is considered far and away the best player in this series. In a close game, which we saw last night at home in Milwaukee, they had to come back, have an explosion in the fourth quarter to win the game. If he has a couple more of those inconsistent free throw line games where they're able to hack Giannis and foul him and put the pressure on him to make free throws, which I think is a good strategy. You've got to play the percentages over the long haul of the playoffs, which I would do. It's going to be a very interesting conversation to have. So we won't have the podcast to see that happen, but we'll maybe jump on something live on the YouTube channel or Facebook and discuss it. We certainly will do something. So make sure you still like and subscribe to the YouTube channel, Brad the Believer, the Facebook channel, the Facebook page, the Twitter at Brad the Believer, because we will still be talking NBA playoffs at some point when these next 3 games wrap up and one of these teams is crowned NBA champion. Spence, let's keep it in the NBA and talk Kawhi Leonard, a guy that's no stranger to hoisting the Larry O'Brien trophy. But it was reported that he'll be undergoing ACL surgery on his knee, and Kawhi has had a lot of issues with injuries over the past. A guy that's already under load management, doesn't play a full 72 or 82 games in any season. At this point in his career, Spence, with all these injuries, considered the best player on almost any team he's going to go to. Are you comfortable paying him big time money for 3, 4, 5 years, not being 100% sure that you can count on this guy to deliver in the playoffs because we don't know if he can stay healthy.
Yeah, this is tough. So I've done a little digging into his contract situation. So he has a player option this year. He will most likely opt out of it. And what I think he's going to want to do is sign a 1-and-1. So first year, obviously, you sign the max. And then the next year is also a player option, which he will then opt out of. This is my prediction. Because after that, he'll have been on the team for 3 years. And that gives you bird rights. And bird rights give you a massive extension. I think he gets like 5 years, $217 million, whatever a crazy amount is. Because otherwise, if he were to sign a contract this season, the most he can get is like 4 years, $175. So there's a huge payday difference. I'm not sure. I think it's good for the Clippers that it'll be on a 1-and-1. Although, when he opts out, you can just say, sorry, we're not interested anymore. And he goes somewhere else. These are the niche parts of basketball because, if he's healthy, this is a guy who can win you a championship. Not like by himself. I don't know. I mean, that Toronto team was a real team, but they leaned on him heavily and he took over. And that's just the kind of player that he is. There's just not a surplus of championship players in the NBA. That's what it comes down to. I think that's been the reality of the case throughout the entirety of, NBA history. It's just the best players win championships. There's always exceptions to that rule. But I would say about 85% of the time, you got to give yourself a chance. And by doing that, you have to have the best players in the league, and he is. So is there a chance that he, signs a supermax 4-year deal and he's never healthy for any of them? Absolutely. I mean, we've seen what happened to the guy. But if you win one championship in any of those years, would it be worth it at that point? I say yes, because, again, it's all about risk, and you have to outweigh it. Like some teams, they are in purgatory forever. The Detroit Pistons made a big trade for Blake Griffin, but that wasn't a championship move, and everybody knew that. But it put them in the playoffs. So it just kind of depends on, how the Clippers are, and they think, oh, we can build a team around Paul George. People say he kind of got rid of his bad playoff moniker, but I actually disagree heavily. He had a lot of really bad games in there. So they have a lot of decisions to make, but I think the correct one is to sign Kawhi Leonard and roll the dice.
I'm going to disagree with that. And it's very tough to say when you got a guy with so much potential and a resume like Kawhi Leonard's. But Spence, my gut is very certain that Kawhi Leonard will not play an NBA game next season. He's already on the road to a 9-month recovery. And knowing his history, he's not going to make die to get out there. He's not going to get there before he's ready. And I think him and his team are going to strategically prepare to take the entire 2021-2022 season to rehab. And I do not think he will play at all next year. I'm very confident in that statement. We'll see if it comes true. Nobody's come out and reported that, but I am very confident that Kawhi will not play one game next season. So the Clippers, in my opinion, are going to have to play next season without Kawhi Leonard. Does that influence their decision in signing him to a 1-year deal or not? I know it's probably not feasible with the way it's set up, but if I was the Clippers, I would try everything I could to do some type of sign and trade to try to get some type of value for Kawhi. That's what I would be thinking. I don't know how possible that is, but I would be thinking that in whatever way I could to know that if I was a GM, Spence, I'm saying I'm sticking to my guns, and I know it's controversial, but I want to move on from Kawhi Leonard because I don't think he's got the sustainability to do what we need him to do, being the best player on this team. So we're going to go ahead and roll with Paul George being the best player. Now, since I've made that decision, is there anything we can do to get maximum value for Kawhi Leonard? And I would explore that option in whatever capacity. And that's very risky. And you talk about gamble, Spence, and with a guy with his resume and his ability, it's a huge gamble. But I've seen a sample size here since he's joined the Clippers, and a guy that's already been a champion and really his toughest road to get one in Toronto. I just think this is another big-time injury. We know that medicine and medically we've advanced so much, But this guy's had a lot of wear and tear, Spence, and this is just another injury that he's got to overcome and expect him to come back and be the guy of old. Not saying that he can't, but man, it is a tough battle for someone that's dealt with this many injuries to stay injury-free moving forward. I don't have that confidence. He's not getting any younger. I would see what I can do if it was at all possible to get him packaged and see what kind of value I could get for him. And
what I'll propose this. Is it worth, if sign and trade for Ben Simmons, would you be willing to do something like that? Or is that not enough for Kawhi Leonard?
Straight up, I don't think it's enough. I would certainly have that conversation if you felt Ben Simmons can take you to that next level. If I'm still being the GM of the Clippers, I'm thinking off the top of my head the type of scoring that the Clippers have and what the Clippers certainly are in the market for a point guard. So that could be an interesting sign and trade or situation to explore. I'm not super high on Ben Simmons, Spence. When you don't have that juice, that it factor, regardless of how talented you are, you're not somebody I'm banging the table for to bring into my locker room. And I think Ben Simmons is ultra talented. He's got the skill set. He's got the size. He's a great passer, ball handler, defender. But no, it would be something I would need a lot more than Ben Simmons, and he probably wouldn't be my main focal point involved in the deal to bring him over. I would definitely want Seth Curry involved in that. I'm very high on him. I think that's somebody you want to definitely add to the mix, a young guy that can fill up the basket, shoot the ball. So now if you're talking Seth Curry, Ben Simmons, and some picks, maybe we get the conversation off the ground. But Ben Simmons, super talented, but not somebody that I'm looking or eyeing as my number one target to acquire in the offseason. And I'm sorry, I am just not one. If you are not a live, die, and I know that's this kind of old fashioned, but if basketball isn't your number one passion and you're not, super hungry to win a title by all means necessary, and not knowing Ben Simmons, but for a guy with 5 or 6 years that has not been able to improve his jump shot or not confident enough to take the jump shots, that concerns me, Spence. Concerns me enough where it's not somebody I want to build my team around.
Well, I'll add to the situation. Let's say that's the best offer you can get talent-wise. So it's either you accept the sign and trade for Ben Simmons, or you let him walk and you test your money in free agency. At that point, would you take the Ben Simmons trade if you're the Clippers?
Say that one more time, Spence. I'm sorry.
So let's say Ben Simmons, like you shop around and the best offer you get is Ben Simmons talent-wise. Like that's the best player you're going to be able to get. So it's A, you do the sign and trade for Ben Simmons and whatever else, or B, you let Kawhi Leonard walk and use the free agency money elsewhere. What would you do at that point?
Here's what I do. I get on the phone before I make that deal, and I find out what the temperature is for Ben Simmons so I can see what I can get to flip him. So I make the deal with Ari making the call and the idea of trying to flip Ben Simmons because that's not what I want. So I try to either get a third team involved for a 3-way sign and trade, which we've seen before, or I try to get the market and see what kind of value I do want and what I can get for Ben Simmons, because I want to try whatever I can to get that value for Kawhi Leonard, knowing that he's going to either walk away for nothing or I have to get something for him. So hopefully that answers your question, and that's how I would handle that situation.
Yeah, I actually, my theory on Ben Simmons, and I think it could be successful, to play him as a small ball center 5. I think it takes a lot of the scoring pressure off of him because you just need that out of a point guard, like dynamically in these days. And, I think he should play more like Draymond Green, but I think he can be better than Draymond Green by a large margin. I think he's more talented than the guy. So I think if you have, because that's what, the Clippers did the entire playoffs, they played 5 forwards in their starting lineup, and that's how they rolled with it. So if you replace the 5, which I think was like Morris or something, and you place him with Ben Simmons, I actually like the outlook of the Clippers a lot. I think he could fit in pretty well there.
And Spence, you said something that's really an interesting and a point that should be looked at. Ben Simmons, talent-wise, is probably far and away superior or better than Draymond Green. And Draymond Green's an Olympian and looked at as a very coveted player. Ben Simmons' mentality, basketball mentality, is night and day opposite of Draymond Green as far as I'm concerned. And that's what differentiates the two for me. And that's unfortunate because with all that talent with Ben Simmons, he's certainly somebody if you think you can change that mindset, you would want to be the guy to do it. I just don't know, Spence, but certainly if there's somebody out there that can get through to Ben Simmons and make something click to give him that confidence and that aggressiveness to really be the type of player he's capable of being, then we're going to see somebody that gets a lot of high praise for maybe helping Ben Simmons turn it around. I'm not rooting against him, Spence, at all. I'm just telling you my honest opinion of him. I think the guy's ultra talented and he has that potential. And I wish for him to turn it around. We would all, as basketball fans, love to see it. But my thing is, if we haven't seen it in 5 years where we know what's needed to be worked on and it hasn't improved, what gives me the evidence to think it's going to happen moving forward? So it's going to be one of the best storylines to follow in the NBA moving forward. But this is the rest stop. We've broadcasted Tuesdays and Thursdays, like Spence said at the beginning of the show, since August 25th. I want to thank everyone that's joined us here tonight. This is going to be the last Rest Stop podcast for the foreseeable future due to time constraints and a new job popping up with myself. So we're still going to do stuff together on the YouTube, on Facebook, on Spence's show and different stuff, some recapping of NBA and stuff. So I hope everyone still follows our social media. We just won't be on the Landry platform or doing the Rest Stop per se for the near future. So I appreciate everyone that's checked in. And you can definitely follow the YouTube channel to check out all of the 86 shows that we've done since August, past and present. So I appreciate everything that Spence has done for the show. And he's a great friend and he's been a great contributor to the show. And I look forward to not only keeping that friendship strong down the road, but also working together in the future as well. But Spence, we want to hit sports in the last 15 minutes or so we have here. And Richard Sherman has been big in the news in the last 24 hours. Former Super Bowl champion, Legion of Boom member of the Seattle Seahawks, San Francisco 49ers. Man, who would have thought? Richard Sherman, Stanford educated, a guy that's been respected for some of his stuff and thoughts off the field. Not a good look for what's happened off the field here lately. Involved in an incident with his wife. Another video came out, an incident at his father-in-law's house. Spence, you put in the graphic here the effects of CTE. This is insane. We're having this discussion with Richard Sherman, a guy that's a free agent looking to still continue his NFL career. That's going to take a big halt with this situation. Do we have any audio from the Richard Sherman situation and the 911 call that was released?
Yeah, so I'll play the video first of him trying to break into this house. I won't play all of it, but
okay,
it's crazy.
Come through, bitch. Come through. Come through. Come through. Come through. Come through, Wayne. Come through. Come through. Come through. Come through. Come through. Come through, Wayne.
Yeah. So I think context-wise, there was also some incidents that happened, before this happened. Heard he had like 2 bottles of like vodka and some other alcoholic thing. So he was on 2 bottles. He crashed in a construction zone. Luckily, no one was hurt, including him. And he became like suicidal. And I'll play some of that police call. I believe this was his wife making that 911 call. As you can see, this is when she made the call after those events that just happened.
911, what are you reporting?
I need officers to my house now. My husband is drunk and threatening to kill himself.
Stop. What's the address? Are there any weapons? Stop.
No, there's no gun. I'm saying there are no weapons, ma'am. There are no weapons.
You need to stop interrupting me so I can get the information I need to get officers expedited.
I need officers here now.
What's he doing that you think he's going to harm himself?
He's being aggressive. He has sent text message. I took the keys out. They're in your car. He's trying to leave now in the house. He's being aggressive. He's wrestling with my uncle. He's threatening to kill himself. He has sent text messages to people saying he's going to hang himself. He's saying that if the police show up, So please don't shoot is what I'm asking.
Okay, wait. Say that again.
He has no weapon.
He says if the police show up,
he
what?
said if the police show up, that he'll try to fight them. So they need
Okay.
to understand that he is.
Okay. Has it been physical with anybody there? You said he's trying to fight your uncle?
Yes, it has. Yes, it has.
How has it been physical?
He just tried to fight him.
Okay, trying to fight somebody and actually being
Yes,
physical
he did.
are two
He
different
did, all the
things.
way
How
down to
has
the
it been physical?
It's a 2016 black Mercedes. Richard, please stop. Richard, please stop. Please stop.
Is that a sedan, SUV?
It's just a black sedan Mercedes SUV.
Okay.
He's not going to be able to get out the gate. I cut it off.
What do you mean you cut it off?
I cut the gate. We live behind it. It's Richard Sherman. Like, ma'am, this is like a emergency. I need officers here
Listen
now.
to me. I'm handling this. You need to stop telling me that.
Okay, but what I'm
not going to slow help down.
He got out. He just got out
Talking to
the
me
gate.
is not going to slow help down.
Okay, well, what I needed to know is that he
What's
was
your
left.
name?
My name is Ashley Sherman.
Do you know what his date of birth is?
3/30/88.
Okay, slow down so I can understand you. What's the date of birth?
March 30th, 1988.
Wow, Spence, this is at first I heard some people pushing back too early to bring CT in the discussion, but I think it's relevant in all of these cases with professional athletes to have the discussion when you talk about behavior that is this extreme. This is pretty intense, Spence. I mean, this is not just football, okay? There was a story in professional wrestling many years ago with Chris Benoit, who was in his 30s and had killed himself and his family. And this is a guy that was ultra respected as a friend, as a person outside of the ring, and would have never been thought to do something like this. And of course, they did studies on his brain after, and CTE was an enormous factor. He had the brain of like a very old man. So, we've seen guys lose their lives, former players, Dave Dewerson, Junior Seau. There's a long list, Spence. There was talks with Aaron Hernandez. I'm not saying that it justifies the behavior, but it's an important factor to consider when you're talking about extreme behavior like this that can't be overlooked. But what can you do, and where do you go from something like this? Clearly, this is not going to get better before it gets worse for Richard Sherman, because he's more than likely now lost his NFL career moving forward. His family's certainly at stake from just hearing that call and some of the other videos we've seen. So to add on to the mental anxiety and depression from losing possibly your profession and your family, it's not going to help what's already seeming to be an internal struggle with Richard Sherman.
Yeah, it's extremely sad. And they say that CT can make you have dramatic anger spouts and mood swings. And as far as I could tell, this was an upstanding guy, like 100%. Never heard any, he talked loud on the field, but that's just something that people do. It's just trash talking. It's part of the game. It's obviously very different than what this was. And I'm sure, it was amplified because of the alcohol, but again,
Sure.
That kind of aggression is just rarely seen. I mean, that was some like bullish anger, like trying to knock down that door.
Yeah.
His wife already came out and said like he's not like this ever. So it's just very concerning, and you hope he can get some help. And again, I really doubt that it has a lot. That it's like everything. It's like, oh, he just had too much to drink that night. I don't think so. I think it's a lot more than that. And here, the thing about it is, the NFL probably does not care. They'll say they do, but they don't help these guys after their careers. Like, he's on the end of it, and we've already known about historically guys who played 3 or 4 years, probably had 4 concussions, or dropped because of medical reasons. Those guys aren't receiving any medical help at all, and they're fighting their way through medical bills just to try to survive. This is a nasty part of football that, Roger Goodell and the billion-dollar owners simply, sweep under the rug. That's why that was the whole point of this new NFL agreement that I cannot believe the NFL players agreed to. It was like such a softball offer, and they took it because they wanted to smoke pot. I really believe that's what it comes down to. Also, they took care of the big stars and their contract negotiations. That was also part of it, giving them more negotiation rights. That is not the average NFL player. And this is a high-profile player who had a very successful career. So I believe he'll get the help, and I really hope he does, and hopefully he's able to, get the medical treatment for whatever this is. But this is just a small taste of what the reality is for guys who try to make it in the NFL, like practice squad guys, burnouts in the 4th round. Like, those guys go on to deal with these kinds of things, and nobody helps them at all.
Spence, who should we look to step up to the plate and help a Richard Sherman or guys that may be in this situation that's not even reported? I mean, who can be go-to people in this situation that can – I mean, how do we monitor this? How do we have somebody there for somebody and help I mean, what can we do medically? I mean, do we even know the answer to that? What can happen at this point medically to know if there's something deeper involved with Richard Sherman or people that's going through something similar to Richard Sherman?
I mean, that's the problem. It would take, first of all, the NFL player reps for each team not to lay down, for money, which they already have. They already did for this long agreement that they have coming up here. And secondly, it takes the NFL to do independent research on this, to have their lead doctors or whatever it is to try to see what happens and at least let the players know. There's the other part of this is there's probably a lot more research. There's a lot more ways to make the game safe. But I think they are working on that for helmets and all that. And I think they're doing the best job that they can. But the other side of this is getting hit in the head 1,000 times in a football career. There's no way to be safe forever. You're going to get brain damage. I mean, you are trading millions of dollars for years out at the end of your life, and maybe even a lot shorter than that. No one wants to probably talk about that because that's really hard to hear. But that's it. I mean, basketball players lose their legs probably pretty quickly, but it's generally a pretty safe sport. Soccer players, I mean, those are stories we don't hear about at all. Hitting the head, your head to the ball so many times, that can't be good for your noggin. I wouldn't imagine, at least. And UFC, we're in the early stages of the UFC. When these guys get older and the first wave of these big UFC fighters get older, I promise you they're not going to have a great end of their life. One guy who's probably going to get lucky and go through a long time is Khabib because he was so dominant and he got out early. God bless him with all the money that he has. Other than that, Conor McGregor, I can't imagine his life's going to end, so hot, along with many other guys. And really, again, I'll say I think it's the fringe guys who are going to be a lot worse, who got absolutely beat up no matter what the sport is and left out to dry, and no one's going to help them. It's going to come down to lawsuits, and they probably won't win. Some will, some won't. It's a sad situation, in my opinion.
That's the voice of Spencer Ostrovsky, also known as Spencer the Wiz on Twitter. Spence, let's finish it up with the GOAT, Tom Brady. This entire past season apparently played the Super Bowl and a lot of the season with a partially torn MCL. I don't know who's verified this story, if Tom Brady's come out and verified this, but you put it here. Does it add to the mysticism and legacy of Tom Brady? To me, at this point, I can't be shocked by a lot that Tom Brady does. He's already defied logic and time and everything else that you could put into a box of stereotyping a professional athlete, much less a white quarterback at the age of 40 with not a ton of athleticism. This guy's defied the odds since day one. And this just adds to the story of possible ways that this guy has continued to overcome and be great. So I don't know how much it adds to it, but to me, Tom Brady is already in a class of his own, and there's not much that he can do or not do that's going to elevate him any more than I've already elevated him. The guy, to me, is the greatest team athlete there's ever been. So how much more can you add to that when you have that opinion of the guy already?
This is the more interesting part about this story for me. And I'll ask you to put odds on this. So we all know that when Tom Brady, years down the line, when he's retired, he's going to have a Last Dance type special from ESPN. It's just guaranteed. He's just to that level. Will this make the Last Dance documentary for Tom Brady, the fact that he played on a torn MCL?
I hope it does, because I would like for him to come out and talk about it if it's true. And if it is true, his sidekick, Alex Guerrero, which is a big person in his recovery in the TB12 method, I'm sure he'll be in there, and there'll be discussions or film in some capacity of Brady discussing it if it is true. So, there's going to be film down the road of a lot of conversations that we haven't been privy to over the years. And I think it's going to be one of the greatest documentaries ever if it's put together, putting all of these years of behind the scenes conversation and footage that we haven't seen of Tom Brady and Tom Brady's crew together. Because look, you can say what you want. You can criticize the guy all you want. The resume speaks for itself, and the guy is in a league of his own. So I think it just continues to just be another notch and peel to the layer of what Tom Brady already is. I mean, what are your thoughts, Spence? To you, does this add anything to you if this is true?
Yeah, I don't know. It really does feel like Michael Jordan to me. Like, I didn't grow up with him, but when you watch The Last Dance, it's legitimately about not making up stories, but embellishing them. And that was kind of the whole thing with Bo Jackson too. It was about elevating his kind of. There was a story of him like chasing a pig or something, like, all that stuff is just makes these guys, bigger than what they really are. But it's funny. I would say minus 250 that yes, this will be in the documentary. I'm sure when we get to that point when sports betting is legal in all 50 states, that will definitely be something that you can put money on.
Well, hopefully Brady is healed up from the partially torn MCL and anything else that he may have incurred along the way. This will do it for the rest stop for the time being. Got to thank Spencer Ostrowski, thank Chris Landry and Landry Football. If you want to check out any of our past podcasts, any of the podcasting platform, Landry Football Conference Call, the rest stop. Also like and subscribe us moving forward. Brad the Believer on YouTube. Also at Brad the Believer, Facebook and Instagram. So I hope everyone has a great night, and we'll check you soon.